In the summer of 1187, one of the most heavily armored armies in the world was entirely destroyed. But they were not defeated by superior weaponry or overwhelming numbers. They were broken by the environment, long before the decisive battle even began. The Muslim territories of Egypt and Syria had recently united under the command of Saladin, a leader with a single, clear objective: recovering Jerusalem. Across the border, the Crusader kingdom of Jerusalem was fracturing. Bitter internal politics pitted established nobles against aggressive new arrivals like King Guy of Lusignan and the powerful military orders. Saladin understood that taking on these crusaders directly was incredibly dangerous. The Christians held a network of formidable fortified cities and castles. Attacking men securely entrenched behind massive stone walls would guarantee a grueling, costly siege. His only viable option was to draw the main Crusader field army out into the open, where his fast, mobile forces could cut them down. Once the army was gone, the castles would fall easily. To take the Holy Land, Saladin needed the Crusader leadership to make a colossal tactical mistake. He had to bait them into abandoning their defenses. Saladin made his opening move by invading the kingdom and laying siege to Tiberias. He chose this target deliberately. The wife of a highly experienced Crusader commander, Raymond of Tripoli, was trapped inside the citadel. While Tiberias was attacked, King Guy assembled the Crusader army at Saphuria, a strong position with abundant water. To relieve Tiberias, they would have to march away from their wells and cross a vast, exposed, and completely dry plateau. Saladin positioned the bulk of his forces along this route. He waited, banking on the idea that Crusader pride would compel them to march out and fight. He was essentially turning the terrain into his primary weapon, relying on the sheer distance and the scorching heat to exhaust his enemy. When news of the siege reached Saphuria, King Guy immediately called his commanders into a war council. Despite his own wife being trapped inside the citadel, Raymond of Tripoli argued vehemently against attempting a rescue. Raymond recognized the trap. He argued that if the Crusader army held its ground at Saphuria, Saladin would eventually struggle to supply his own troops in the heat and be forced to withdraw. Initially, logic prevailed. King Guy accepted Raymond's advice, and the order was given to stay put. But that night, the Grand Master of the Knights Templar, Gerard de Riedfort, visited the king's tent. Gerard hated Raymond. He accused him of cowardice and threatened to withdraw the vital support of the military orders if the army failed to rescue a Christian city. King Guy yielded to the political pressure. He completely reversed his decision. The army would march the following morning. The fate of the kingdom was sealed right there, in the dark. The need for internal political survival overrode basic military logistics, putting the entire army on a collision course with disaster. Just before sunrise on July 3rd, roughly 15,000 Crusader soldiers left their secure water supplies behind and began the slow trek across the plateau. Progress was crawling. The men were marching in the intense heat of a Middle Eastern summer, wearing chainmail armor over heavy padded clothing. Every soldier carried only a limited amount of water, which vanished quickly. Saladin then sprung the trap. He sent waves of mounted archers in rapid hit-and-run attacks against the Crusader column. Their goal was to force the heavy infantry to halt and defend the knights, keeping the entire army baking under the sun. By late afternoon, exhaustion had set in. A desperate push toward the springs of Hattin might have saved them, but King Guy ordered the army to halt. They set up camp right in the middle of the arid plateau. They spent the night surrounded. Saladin's forces kept up the psychological pressure, reportedly taunting the severely dehydrated Crusaders by displaying fresh water and pouring it into the dirt. Then Saladin amplified their misery. His men set fire to the dry scrub brush surrounding the camp, sending waves of intense heat and choking smoke blowing directly into the Crusader lines. As the sun rose on July 4th, the Crusaders were broken. Before the decisive fighting had even started, they were facing Saladin's troops, blistering heat, and lethal dehydration. When the Crusaders finally tried to march toward the springs, their formation simply collapsed. Driven mad by thirst, groups of infantry broke away to seek higher ground. Without their protection, the knights were swiftly picked apart by Muslim archers. Aside from Raymond of Tripoli, who managed a desperate charge to break through the lines and escape, The vast majority of the trapped Crusader army was either killed or captured. The psychological death blow came when Saladin's troops captured the True Cross, one of the most sacred relics carried by the Christian army. In the immediate aftermath, high-status nobles like King Guy were taken prisoner. However, Saladin ordered the execution of captured members of the military orders and those he deemed oathbreakers. The strategic situation had completely inverted. Because King Guy committed the entire military strength of the kingdom to a single march, the formidable Crusader castles were now empty. There was almost no one left to defend them. Saladin moved rapidly, capturing the undefended fortresses one by one. On October 2nd, 1187, the city of Jerusalem surrendered to him. The Battle of Hattin remains a stark historical warning. Heavy armor, superior numbers, and fortified walls offer zero protection when leadership allows political hubris to override basic logistics, geography, and the vital necessity of water.